Yeah, and the two big things that he teaches him in chapter 10 are Alar and Heart of Stone, because those are going to be pivotal for Sympathy, and Kvothe uses Heart of Stone a number of times as well. Both of them play a massive role in his magic moving forward. So, like with Alar, you have he says that's the sort of belief I want. It's called Alar, writing crop belief. When I drop this stone, it will float away, free as a bird. So Alar is basically like willpower and convincing your mind that if your mind believes something is true, then you can make it true. And, you can believe that when you drop a stone that it's going to go up. And if you have an iron heart Alar, you can convince yourself that that is true. And then you can use that in Sympathy to make it true with the sympathetic bindings, which we'll get into in the next chapter. But the Alar is the willpower of the magic. You have to have, the stronger your Alar is, the stronger your willpower, the stronger your magic will be, the harder it will be for other people to break your Alar, to defeat you, and to stop you from doing something you're trying to do with Sympathy. So Alar is, it's huge. Like they say, it's the cornerstone of Sympathy. And he says, if you're going to impose your will on the world, you must have control over what you believe. And so Kvothe develops a extremely strong Alar over the series. Like, especially when Ambrose is attacking him, but he doesn't know it's Ambrose. But when he's being attacked, and he has to constantly have his Alar raised to be able to defend against those attacks. He does it for so long that he comes out of it, and his Alar is strong as shit.
Well, when we get little pieces, too, where, they're showing Denna what Sympathy is at the Aeolian. It's him and Will and Sim and Denna all sitting at a table, and he's just showing her real basic things, and eventually Will and Sim both try to prevent him from doing it. And then at some point, Sim's like, dude, that's just creepy, because he's breaking his mind into so many different parts that even for guys that know this stuff and know it inside and out, they're even getting appreciation for how great Kvothe's Alar is, how much stronger it is than other people's. So it's like those little...
two of them combined weren't able to overpower him.
Well, and then we get it in the classes too, but yeah.
Yeah.
I love the way that they explain this, and I think they go back to it again when he's playing this game, Seek the Stone, where he hides the rock inside of his head and then breaks his mind into two, and the other guy has to go find it, the other side of his head. I just thought that was a great way to explain how he builds that Alar. And along your same lines, when he's one of the other interesting stories having to do with that, him breaking his mind, is later on when he gets in that battle with Devi, the lady that's got his that he gets the loan from, and he thinks that she's been. You might have to correct me on some stuff here, Dan, but he's trying to figure out who's messing with him. And he thinks that Devi has sold his blood or maybe his hair or something. And so he goes into her house and attacks her, so to speak. And he has to break his mind a few times and finds out pretty quick that she's got a really strong Alar too. So it brings so much. It makes it's one of my favorite parts of these books is the Alar and the breaking apart of your mind. A lot of good stuff there.
Yeah. He tried breaking his mind into like 5 or 6 parts and put 5 or 6 bindings on her and was still not able to restrain her. And then especially once she ended up getting a better source than him with her fire, then it was over. He had no chance at that point. But yeah, that's what Seek the Stone does. You have the Alar part of magic, which is your willpower, and your strength of will is extremely important. Seek the Stone is important because that's teaching you how to split your mind into multiple pieces. So if you can split your mind into multiple pieces, you can do multiple acts of sympathy at the same time. you could, you can pick up 4 or 5 coins at once with that, by separating your mind into 5 parts and doing sympathetic bindings on all those coins, or, do 5 separate sympathetic bindings on a bowstring so that when you cut the bowstring, it snaps 5 different bows. So you can do, the reason he's able to do those things is because of a game like Seek the Stone. That's what it's demonstrating to you, is the importance of why you would need to break your mind into multiple parts. That's a huge part of Sympathy, and it makes sense of a lot of the scenes later on when he does break his mind into other parts. You kind of got an idea why he's able to do that, what's going on. And the way he writes it, it's extremely, it's clever because it's funny. Like when he's talking about, I remember one time I looked for a stone for almost an hour before I consented to ask the other half of me where I'd hidden it, only to find out I hadn't hidden the stone at all. I'd merely been waiting to see how long I would look before giving up. Have you ever been annoyed and amused with yourself at the same time? It's an interesting feeling, to say the very least. It's a classic line.
Yeah,
classic line.
It makes me. It's made me laugh every single time. It's very rare that a book or anything can put you in a position like that as a reader, where you're just like, because you're on so many different levels. It's clever and it's amusing at the same time, but it's hard to get there. It takes a lot of work to get
insane.
there.
Yeah. It's insane too. Like the idea of tormenting yourself.
But
and it's not only that, like you're sitting back, like mocking your own stupidity. Like, look at this moron. He's looking for some stone I didn't even hide. It's like, yeah, that's you. You're doing this to yourself.
In particular, what to me is so impressive about that is what he does in a few pages here is he starts off by mentioning botany, astronomy, psychology, anatomy, geology, chemistry. By mentioning those and then mentioning sympathy, it's separated from those things, right? So it is different, but it's on a level like those things. And then he describes what a knack is and how this is separate from a knack. So we're gradually, we're being exposed to these things, but then we're stepping away from them at the same time. So he's just building towards what this difference is. And then we go into the mind games and the memory games, and like what you guys were just talking about, those were exercises that Ben, they were like puzzles, right? Like little brain puzzles, little games that they would play, mental exercises. And he's consistently just building him into being able to utilize his mind in different ways, which was also great because we know just from these chapters that Arladin and his mother, they used to do similar things, right? Like some sort of mental exercises where they would like make up their own stories, something along those lines. I don't remember exactly, but it was something along the lines of like they used to do these mental puzzles as well.
Yeah.
So
they did with like learning lines of plays and stuff like that, kind of teaching him working his memory, his ability to memorize the plays and learn different skills and stuff like that.
So it's these building blocks that get us to that point, and then to where we can get to like that line. That's not possible without all these other building blocks that get us into the psychological space that we're in these chapters, which is so interesting because he's got to create that for us to buy what sympathy is. And then once he creates that space that we can be in, then we learn about what sympathy really is, the mechanics of it. And yes, he writes it superbly, but again, you got to set the table ahead of time, and that's what these chapters do so well.
And he does a good job of setting up that Seek the Stone game with the previous lesson where he's like, I'm going to drop this stone, believe that it's going to go up. And then once, he was demonstrating a Alar. Once he was able to convince himself that was true, that's developing a iron hard Alar. But then he was like, now I want you to believe it's going to fall up and down. And so that was showing to believe two separate things. And then the next scene is Seek the Stone, where I broke one part in my mind to find the stone and the other part to hide the stone. And so he does a really good job of explaining magic. He, gives us, these info dumps, and he explains them in very entertaining way to read. It's an entertaining chapter, even though he's dropping a lot of info.
I like the way.
Speaking of,
I was just going to say, he also subtly, because what you're describing right there, there's a subtle point where, maybe it's not so subtle, but he mentions that once he finally figures it out, after all the challenging, he's getting frustrated, and he's like, he's not getting it. He's getting frustrated about it. Finally, he's like, I got it. And then he says, I went to bed late that night. I had a nosebleed and a smile of satisfaction. I held the two separate beliefs loosely in my mind and let their singing discord lull me into senselessness. So he figured it out, and he's just like, I love that short little paragraph is so great, because you can picture, I can picture moments in my youth where it's like you do figure something out. It's like your whole life from this point forward, is going to be different because of what you've learned at that point. And that's one of these moments. And he's just, it's so great, like the way that he wrote that. And then it's off and running from here. It's Heart of Stone. It's, this is where he starts to play Seek the Stone. It's all from that point, but he had to go through all the frustrating, he's getting a headache, like you said, he's got nosebleed, all these other things, but he gets it. He finally gets it. And then he never lets it go.
Could you guys talk a little bit more about what Heart of Stone is?
Yeah, that was the last part I was going to bring up here. So Heart of Stone is the third part. So you got the Alar, and then you got your breaking your mind into separate parts, and then you also have Heart of Stone. Heart of Stone is, you could think of it as like putting your mind in a logical, emotionless state where you're not thinking with emotions or any kind of feeling like that. You're just thinking very clearly and logically, and it's almost like putting yourself in a Spock-like state.
Didn't you describe Heart of Stone as like you can go to your sister's funeral and not weep or something?
Yeah, Ben said a man who truly mastered Heart of Stone could go to his sister's funeral without ever shedding a tear. So it lets you, like you said, it lets you think clearly about whatever you wish.
It's
so
focus.
You're able to, kind of just be clear and unemotional and just think logically. So I always think of it as like kind of a Vulcan state, like Spock. It's the way I kind of imagine it in my mind. Whereas Alar is your willpower, and then you have your ability to break your mind into multiple parts, to think, multiple things at the same exact time. And then with Heart of Stone, that's putting your emotions aside and just being able to think clearly, which are all come and play a role pivotally, especially in the scene where he's fighting the bandits in the woods. I mean, you see Heart of Stone, how pivotal it is that it keeps him from panicking, from getting scared, worrying, and overthinking things. Like, he just puts himself deep into Heart of Stone, and then he just goes about his business on, taking out all those guys. And he doesn't let his emotions overwhelm him.
Would I be right in saying, so like the skill itself is an extreme focus on logic and clarity? And then my second question would be, how does he practice it? Do we get to that? Or does it ever come up?
No, it doesn't really say on how he practices.
It doesn't. It's not.
It's just something that is there. He just does.
It's like a switch. He just turns it on.
Yeah. Same with like Spinning Leaf is another one.
Yeah.
Which we talked about, but he just kind of puts his mind into it. I mean, he does it a number of times, like when he's up on the horns and stuff. He also, when the pressure starts to build and he starts to kind of panic a little bit, then he dips himself into Heart of Stone and he's able to kind of defend himself from there.
He gets a lot of, he utilizes it quite a bit, where a lot of times he lowers himself into Heart of Stone before doing something, before something he's about to try to do, because of the intense focus of what it is.
But that's probably all I have to say on these chapters. I don't know if you guys... what we should really touch on is the actual lesson, because it gives you a really good grounding for Sympathy and a really important grounding for understanding what he does to kill the Dracus later on in the book. This is like a massive part of being able to understand what he did to the Dracus. So he's like, the concepts of Sympathy are not entirely easy to grasp, but underneath everything, there are three main simple laws. First is the doctrine of correspondence, which says similarity enhances sympathy. Second is the principle of consanguinity, which says a piece of a thing can represent the whole of a thing. Third is the law of conservation, which says energy cannot be destroyed nor created. Correspondence, consanguinity, and conservation, the three C's. And then he's like, in Sympathy, most of what you are doing is redirecting energy. Sympathetic links are how energy travels. I pulled out the wicking and began kneading the wax into a roughly human-shaped doll. The first law I mentioned, similarity enhances sympathy, simply means that the more things resemble each other, the stronger the sympathetic link between them will be. So you get that, again, reinforced that the more similar something is, the better the link is going to be. So, and then he kind of goes through, like, what's wrong with the wax doll.
Dude,
and it's the wrong size, and blah, blah, blah.
He's a good teacher. Like, he does a very good job as an instructor. And he even speaks about that after the three C's. First of all, the three C's, that would be a great way to help kids learn it. But then he even says, you know, as he's starting the lesson, he's like, I realized I could grow to enjoy this. And then it almost feels like, when I read this, I was like, he's going to be an instructor. He's going to end up being one of the masters. That's what I thought when I read it, because I thought that's what it was going to lead to.
Yeah.
You know?
He could have been a great teacher. Obviously, that's not where it goes, but yeah, he could have been. And this part gives you a good lesson about why the similarities, it gives you an extra layer of why it's important, because he's like, when he asks him for why it's not a good link, and they're like, it's the wrong size, and I nodded and continued to look around the room. He isn't made of wax either. I nodded. It does bear some small resemblance to him in general shape and proportion. Nevertheless, it's a very poor sympathetic representation. Because of that, any sympathetic link based off it would be rather weak. Perhaps 2% efficiency. How could we improve it? There was another silence shorter than the first. You could make it bigger. Someone suggested. I nodded and waited. Other voices came out. You could carve Master Him's face on it, paint it, give it a little robe. Everyone laughed. So it gives you that understanding that, like, just a wax doll of someone gives you about 2% efficiency. And then even doing, you know, all these other things, you make it his size, and it's like, you know, practicality aside, assume you did all these things. A 6 foot, fully clothed, masterfully carved Master Him stands beside me. I gestured. Even with all that effort, best you might hope for is 10 or 15% sympathetic link. Not very good, not very good at all. So you start getting not only just why a sympathetic link is important, but he starts giving you percentages to kind of like put it in your mind, like how good a link could be, how bad one could be. And he gives you these percentages as you go along, what would give you a higher percentage, lesser percentage. And so you really start to understand sympathetic links in this chapter and how exactly they work.
Yeah, it all sort of makes sense there. Like you said, Kvothe does a great job teaching it. So,
well, and to do it in such a way, I mean, this is very practical for our knowledge, because he's going to end up using sympathetic links to murder people. I mean, and this is the the biggest thing that he's not supposed to do. But again, why he gets away with it in the way that he does, and he doesn't fully get away with it, obviously, but why he does is, again, all these things have to align together, that it's his first lesson, and Hem gives permission. I don't know if we skipped over that, but that was one of the most important things, was when he asks. Oh, I guess we're getting to that, but that he asks him and he gives his permission. So the actual verbal permission in front of a whole room full of people. So it, it keeps his hands clean, man.
Yeah. And then you get the second law, consanguinity, and he's like, an easy way of thinking of it is once together, always together. So that's why the hair is important, is because the hair is him. It's a part of him.
Literally.
Master him. So it's literally a part of him. So by putting that hair on this wax doll that has maybe a 2% sympathetic link, all of a sudden now he says it'll work at 30 to 35%. So you get like how something that similar to him can enhance the link significantly.
Well, and that really helps us when Debbie asks for blood. Because then, I mean, we immediately are like, "Whoa, okay." And now he does also he helps us a little bit in how Kvothe reacts and why he shouldn't do it and blah blah blah. But I mean, imagine one hair versus your blood. I mean, that's vicious, and especially with her capabilities.
And then you get the great part, and so sure that he had taken me for a fool, I gestured to the candle and asked him, with your permission, Master. He made a magnanimous wave of compliance and settled back into his chair, folding his arms in front of him, confident in his safety. Of course, I did know the binding. I told him so, and Bennett taught me about the Alar, the riding crop belief, back when I was 12. But I didn't bother with either. I put the doll's foot into the candle flame, which guttered in smoke. There was a tense, held breath, quiet, as everyone stretched in their seats to look at Master Him. Him shrugged, feigning astonishment, but his eyes had the look of a jaw trap about to close. A smirk tugged at one corner of his mouth, and he began to rise from his seat. I feel nothing. What exactly? I said, cracking my voice like a whip, startling the student's attention back to me. And why is that? I looked expectantly at the hall. Because of the third law that I had mentioned, conservation. Energy cannot be destroyed or created, merely lost or found. If I were to hold a candle underneath our esteemed teacher's foot, very little would occur. And since only about 30% of the heat is getting through, we do not even get that small result. So that's extreme revelation to how sympathy works. Because when he says, like, if I held a candle under his foot, not much is going to happen. But I'm only getting 30% of that. So it's like holding a candle under his foot, but only getting 30% of that actual act. So that really gives you an idea of the sympathetic links and that kind of stuff. Is like he's using this magic, but this magic is less effective than just holding a candle under his actual foot because of how weak the link is. But then he adds a second binding, and he combines the candle to the brazier. So now it is like holding the brazier underneath him's foot.
And
which, obviously, if you held the brazier under his foot just by itself, would fucking light his shit on fire. And so now, when he holds the candle under the foot, you have the 30% link, but also it's not just a 30% link of a candle under the foot, it's a 30% link of a brazier under his foot. It's not the full power of the brazier, but it is a much hotter fire under his foot than before. And I think that, to me, that illuminates how sympathy works massively. Yeah. Like when I read that aspect of it, sympathy makes so much more sense.
Absolutely.
To me after that.
And there was one other aspect of it that kind of pieced it together before he talks about combining the brazier to the, or putting those two together. He has to break his mind apart again, or into two parts. And so that, that began to make more sense to me as well, that, on this side, he's holding a mommet to him, and on this side, he's holding a candle to the brazier on each side of his mind. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So you have, he's making the candle, he is making it Master Him, and he's making the wax mommet Master Him, and he's making the candle the brazier. And so he's getting 30% from the mommet to him, and he's getting whatever percent from the candle to the brazier. But those combinations is changing it to lighting Master Him with a weakened brazier is basically what he's doing. So it'd be more effective to just hold fucking Master Him over a brazier. But what Sympathy allows you to do is to fucking light him with a brazier without actually having to fucking be near him to do it.
And so
he loses some of the energy, but you get an idea of how he's able to do these things.
A little more mathematically, if they were both, because he said, that the candle was part of the fire that was in the brazier was added onto the candle itself. So that's 30%. The Mamet compared to him is 30%. 30% of 30% is 10%. And so when, in the next chapter, not to jump ahead, but when one of the masters,
Kilvin.
Yeah, what is this, Kilvin?
Kilvin.
Yeah, Kilvin says, you should have only got 10%, and then it seems like...
it's actually, Kvothe ends up saying it. He's like, I thought I should have only got 10% transference. But that gives you the idea. It's like, instead of lighting him's foot with a candle, he's lighting him's foot with a brazier, and it's not as effective as holding him over the brazier, but it is effective.
Yeah.
And you could do it from a distance. You don't have to be close to him. You don't actually have to grab him to be in physical possession. All you need is a hair and wax. You could fucking put this dude over a brazier and set his ass on fucking fire. Like, Sympathy's no fucking joke, and you learn it for real here.
What Fitz just mentioned there about Kilvin and Kvothe himself also being surprised. I mean, again, that's the genius of how Rothfuss set this all up, is that he gets to play ignorant, and he gets to legitimately play ignorant. And that's the only way he can get away with this, and that's why this is not done with malice, and that's again why he can get away with it, but yet still this fucking prick gets his just deserves, and it's just great. So it's so satisfying, all these different levels, and then on top of everything else, he's explaining what could be some of the driest parts of the book to read, to get this information dealt to us, and yet it's one of the best chapters in the entire book. It's very impressive.
And beyond, not just the entire book, but in any book or many books.
Yeah. It's very memorable. Yeah.
You get the great part too. Like, after that, he's like, there was a startled exclamation from where him was sitting. Without looking in his direction, I continued speaking to the class in the driest of tones, and it appears that this time we are successful. The class laughed. I blew out the candle. This is also a good example of the power that a clever sympathist commands. Imagine what would happen if I were to throw the doll into the fire itself. I held it over the brazier. As if on cue, him stormed onto the stage. It may have been my imagination, but it seemed to me that he was favoring his left leg slightly. It appears that Master Him wishes to resume your instructions at this point. Laughter rippled through the room, louder this time. I thank you all, students and friends, and thus my humble lecture ends. Yeah, we get right in the beginning, we get Sigildry, and we learn how complex it can be, and how, like, on a lot of the complexities of it make it almost useless in many respects. Like, for when he goes through the long list of the different runes that you would need to make bricks stick together, he goes through this long thing, and he's like, and as you can see, it's a lot simpler just to use whatever mortar or whatever they use. And so what I like about that is it's similar with Sympathy, where when he demonstrates how to light Master Him's foot on fire, and he's talking about the candle being underneath his foot, and it would, it wouldn't burn him, but even with the Sympathy, it would even do less than that. It shows the limitations of the magic. It demonstrates the limitations of it. Obviously, there's other uses for it. There's, things that make it very useful, but there are limitations as well. And you get demonstrated that with Sigildry very well right here.
And, the more I'm reading this, again, the more appreciation I have of him explaining the magic side of it. Like, not a lot of of fantasy books or stories do that. You just, all of a sudden you have a wizard and his wand, and he can make a goat out of a monkey for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, he's got great explanation to it.
That's one of my favorite things about the series and what he does is that, most things that I've come across, there's magic and there's not a real explanation as to how it works, how it functions and where the existence comes from. He ties all this down, and it's tied down in it feels like something that would be possible in our world because it feels like physics and it feels like, engineering to a degree. And especially with the sigildry, I mean, because there's so much complexity to it. It's great, man. I mean, Rothfuss really, that's one of the main things that really attracted me to it initially, because when I hear, if it was introduced to me that, there's magic in the world, that kind of turns me off, frankly, when I'm going to read something. I'm not real into that idea. I like the idea of things that are extra natural or supernatural to our world, but it's only really so interesting to me when it's kind of supplements or, helps emphasize what human beings are capable of. You know what I mean? And he does that here because he ties it down into our own reality. So it's easier to buy, it's easier to understand, or at least understand why it could exist in the world.
I like that he has both types of magic. He's got the unexplainable naming, shaping, which we don't really understand yet. We haven't heard enough about, but there are things in the world like what Florian can do, what he can do with the name of the wind or the name of different iron, stone, all that kind of stuff. But then there's also the mechanical magic as well that has, there is a grounding for it, an explanation how it can build up on each other. It has very specific limitations, and so you get both in this world. He doesn't just give you, the force. He gives you the force plus the more mechanical magic.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance. Especially when you also bring in music, and then the things that we don't fully understand with like the Ilish knots, and there's these supplementary ways where it becomes a larger body of potential. It's great, and it's super interesting because it just widens out even that world itself of what how magic works in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan, about what you were saying last week about the when they start trying to explain the subtleties of the Force after a few episodes, how it loses its luster. In this one, though, I mean, in this series, though, I feel like the explained magic is done so well that it adds so much. You can just go in and start saying, well, I used a moment and it helped me stab this guy without any explanation. It's done so well, and it's so well thought up or invented that it's very enjoyable. And you're right, both ways with the mysterious stuff with the Ilish knots and the naming and anything else to come. With the Fae, for instance, we don't know anything about how the Fae was created and all that. But so you still have that, but I do enjoy the explanation behind sigildry and sympathy.
And a lot of it is how you start off. Like if he had started off with sympathy, and like Abenthy had no idea how he was doing what he was doing, or he couldn't even explain it, and it just seemed as fantastical magic where it didn't seem like there was any limitations. And then after all that, then you start adding in explanations after the fact, like in book 2 or something. Yeah. And then they start bringing in like the mathematics and all that shit. It would lose something. Or if you did with naming, where all of a sudden, like now, like they could point to mathematical formulas to explain naming, it would lose something. But when you started off with this is, you build it from the ground up, then it works. But if you do it the opposite way, you start with the fantastical, and then you slowly start building it back towards the foundation. I don't think it works very well if you do it in reverse.
Yeah, not for the audience. I mean, that's like imagining he starts out in the Fae. That's how you open the book. It'd be like,
Yeah.
What? Like, what? You wouldn't be able to grasp most of what's happening. It's hard enough to grasp it, when we get there, But yeah, I mean, we've said that plenty of times that it's very artfully done. It's very thoughtful the way he builds these things towards. And he does that in so many ways. I mean, there's plenty of examples here where he kind of does that little bit of like patchwork, little breadcrumbs leading into what we're going to see later. And it just plants it in your mind. It's great.
And you get how brilliant he is compared to other students. Because when he's talking about learning all the runes, there was 197 of them. And so it's like learning a new language, except there were nearly 200 unfamiliar letters. And you had to invent your own words a lot of the time. And so he said most students, it would take them a month. And for him, it took him like 7 days. And so he said first I was driven. Other students could afford to stroll through their studies. Their parents or patrons would cover the expense. I, on the other hand, needed to climb the ranks in the fishery quickly so I could earn money working on my own projects. Tuition wasn't even my first priority anymore. Debbie was. Second, I was brilliant. Not just your run-of-the-mill brilliance either. I was extraordinarily brilliant. Lastly, I was lucky, plain and simple.
So that last part, I don't understand why he said he was lucky. I think
what the lucky is, how you talked about how Ari is kind of, you said there was a sound, somebody, basically like a rustle in the leaves or something like that, which, by the way, that's the name of the guy that hides in the leaves. Do you know that? His name's Russell.
Russell? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that makes more sense now.
No, but he's practicing the song 10 tap. He's practicing. He's playing the song 10 Tap Tim, right? So he's playing that song, and then he sort of hears something. He goes to check it out, but he was also studying the runes, and he's been trying to memorize the runes at the same time. And the song's sort of playing in the background of his head as he's investigating what was going on. And then I think the luck is he sort of stumbled while he was looking for Ari. What it really came down to was it kind of clicked in his head that he could make a song to the same rhythm that is the runes. That's what he memorized to pass the test with Kmar.
So I think that's what I think is part of the luck. Yeah. And did you guys have a visceral hatred of the name of that song?
No.
What was it?
Like Tam Tap Tim. I just hate it for some reason.
Oh, what a dick.
Oh yeah.
You don't like the number 10?
Rub me the wrong
Is that your
way.
problem?
Yeah.
You don't like the number 10?
Yeah, it's just something about it. It's just like the ending of it just hits my ear wrong. Just brings up hatred. But then, so then we get into the class. I like how it shows Elxa Dal teaching when it's Elxa Dal stood between two medium-sized braziers, and his well-trimmed beard and dark master's robes still remind me of the stereotypical evil magician that appears in so many bad Aturan plays. What each of you must remember is that the sympathist is tied to flame. He said, "We are its master and its servant." And then he walks slowly from one brazier to the next, and as he walks away from one, it dims, and the one he walks towards lights up. And obviously, and then Kvothe appreciates that the flair for the dramatic that he has, his showmanship. But they do a good job of demonstrating that Elxa Dal is a pretty fucking solid teacher. This seems like his classes seem like they'd be fun to begin with because you're learning how to duel, but also it seems like he's probably a pretty fucking good teacher as well.
Yeah, and then Kvothe even points out just the raw practicality of, if you're going to be an arcanist, you need to be able to defend yourself in the world because there are other people out there like this. So he kind of, you're learning the basics of how to wield this power, but then at the same time, they're learning how to fight.
Yeah, and they're trying to teach them how to fight, but not spelling it out that's what they're trying to do, because obviously they have the rules against using magic for what do they call it when he used it against him? They said he malfeasance.
Mm-hmm.
Using magic to harm someone's called malfeasance, and Arcanus used to be burned at the stake for doing that kind of thing. So it's definitely frowned upon, but they're not so naive as to realize that some people aren't learning this shit and then going out in the world and using it for nefarious purposes. So they're preparing people to be able to go out in the world and defend themselves and to fight people that are using it for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, and much like we talked about with Ari, this is a similar situation where we get here and Kvothe's undefeated. He can barely get good odds when betting against him, or when going through the betting process, because he's smoking everybody. And again, man, it's really he's building again so effectively tension throughout this, because Kvothe's got an idea, this great idea, right? I'm going to turn the odds against me. How am I going to do that? Well, we'll figure it out. And then Savoy's like, all right, well, okay. And then, we get it fed to us with our understanding. So again, we've talked about this before, man, to be able to explain how it works and to do it in an interesting way. You put this fucking life on the line, man. Like, to be able to learn dueling or this type of sympathy in this way, and to learn it to where two people pitted against each other, yet Kvothe has made it so risky for himself, and he's physically and pretty much mentally exhausted leading up to this point as well. And it's great. Just that confluence of all these factors just builds and builds and builds the tension. And then, we're so invested in the battle by that point. It's freaking great, man.
So I've got a question about the battle itself, if you guys will allow it. So,
Nope.
No? Okay, never mind. What I understand is basically they're having to use their own body heat as the source of energy. And Fenton has a piece of a wick that he's using as his sympathetic link between himself, because he's holding the wick in his hand, and the wick of a candle that's in front of Kvothe. And Kvothe is using a piece of straw as a sympathetic link that he's holding in his hand as he's using that straw to light the candle in front of Fenton, but Fenton gets himself into trouble because not only is he not just using the warmth from his hand, but somehow or other he has pricked himself, and he's actually using his blood and the wick as a sympathetic link.
Yeah, he's using his blood.
But so the big setup, the big thing, just to make sure Fitz didn't miss it, the fact that they don't have a source. Kvothe expected he would pick a source, and Fenton says no source for the heat, which means they have to use body heat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so like the link is between the wick and the candle. And so Kvothe's link is between straw and the candle. So his link is like 10 times worse than Fenton's. And then the source is just their body heat. So they have to use their body heat to create fire to light the other person's candle. And because he's using straw as his link and the other guy's using wick, he's at a severe disadvantage. They have the same source, so they don't have an advantage on the source. They both have to use their body heat. But as far as the links between what they got for the to light these, to use your source, to use your body heat to light the candle, their link is lighting the wick or the straw and using that to light the candle. So Kvothe's at a severe disadvantage, and he's bet all his money that he has on this, and he wasn't expecting to be at such a disadvantage. He thought it would be lessened when you bring in the brazier. It would have made it an easier job for him, and it would have been he would have felt comfortable being able to overcome the disadvantage, but the position he's put himself in, that disadvantage that he's in right now, that he did not feel that he was going to be able to overcome.
Yeah, he says, I couldn't win. I mean, he said, not only was I going to lose my perfect rank, he was like, I had no way to signal Savoy. So again, I mean, he just keeps building the tension and building and building. So then you get that too, where he's trying to like look at Savoy and kind of signal to him to like cancel the bets. Can't do that either. So he's like, shit, man. So it just keeps build. So the stakes they keep building, man. So now the money's on the line. We don't really get as much that his life is on the line. We just think, all right, now he's going to lose all this money. And again, he just reminded us, Debbie, tuition, like everything that's on the line here, man. And it just keeps building. There's so much tension in this chapter, man. It's just freaking great.
So the one thing that they didn't even mention at this point is that Fenton is using his blood. So I didn't pick up on that my initial read through. So my reread through I did. So I started thinking about it, and I was like, okay, so if let's say that the straw compared to the wick is 1/10 of a sympathetic link, and then the simple fact of Kvothe holding that straw in his hand compared to Fenton holding a bloody wick, where he can have like a direct draw of heat from his own blood, make that another, 1/5. His Kvothe's alar has to be, 50 times stronger than what Fenton's doing. And I thought it was really funny when before he even knew that, when they're sitting there and they first start off, and so Kvothe starts trying to put his hand in front of the Kindle like, no,
yeah, he does
you can't see it
petty,
there.
Little petty tricks. I think what this speaks to, the fact that he thought, I can't win. It's over. I'm going to lose the money. I think that speaks to, again, like what happened with him, where he's like, I shouldn't have been able to do this. He's surprising himself yet again. I think this again goes back to what Dan said, that he's like a direct descendant of like the greatest of the great. I think he's, and I'll bring it up later, but well, go ahead. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. I also love, like, right before the battle starts, when he kind of lays out what they're going to do, he's like, the object was to light your opponent's candle without letting him do the same to yours. This involves splitting your mind into two different pieces. One piece tried to hold the alar that your piece of wicking, or straw if you were stupid, was the same as the wick of the candle you were trying to light. Then you drew energy from the source to make it happen. What I like of that part is again, his deadpan humor that he puts in these books, where or straw if you were stupid.
It's always compelling for the character that, has all these powers, still will self-deprecate. That's always compelling to me. It's very much unlike Dan, however, that he can self-deprecate himself, and be humble, literally, actually, in actuality be humble, not just, say that he is, but actually be.
Well, that is that is an impressive quality for Kvothe is he's so powerful and he's humble. He's not got my level of humility, but he's got some level of humility, and that is impressive for people like him and me to have humility with our extreme prowess.
Interesting.
Is self-deprecating.
You brought it up, so
he's got the other side.
Make it clear for the audience so they could understand where you are drawing that similarity between me and Kvothe yet again.
Well,
you keep bringing it up, and I agree with you 100%.
But there's a difference between what I'm saying with Kvothe is self-deprecating. You're self-defecating. There's the difference between those two.
I'm Tim defecating. I'm shitting on you guys.
What do I got to do with it? I didn't say it. But yeah, you do run the parallels with Kvothe there. He was that last chapter when he's like, I wasn't luck, okay, or maybe I was a little luck, but I was brilliant. And I don't mean I was just brilliant, but I was really brilliant.
I'm with you guys. I'm very much like Kvothe. I 100% agree with everything you guys are saying.
But what you explain there with Kvothe's explanation is huge, because it is explaining how this actually works, what they're actually doing, breaking the mind into two parts. I don't think we've gotten that before this. Well, maybe
He had to when in Him's class he had to break his mind in multiple
Oh,
parts,
yeah.
and then
Okay.
obviously when he's learning it, seek the stone and that kind of stuff. So
Oh,
it's just another layer of that.
Yeah. All right. So, but then he says again, I immediately devoted my whole mind to the defense of my own candle. Began to think furiously. There was no way I could win. No way I could win. It doesn't matter how skilled a fencer. Blah blah blah. He goes on, but then he lowers himself into the heart of stone. So we get that again. And there's a few times in this group of chapters where he does give us a little bit of a clearer picture of Heart of Stone. At least that's kind of what I remember from these chapters. Where, I mean, first he lowers himself in the Heart of Stone, just devoting most of his mind to the protection of the candle. And then he does what Fitz said, where he just does a little binding with the candle, then tips it over, tries to get it to roll off of Fenton's table. I like all that stuff, those little distractions. And then he tries to tell him a joke or something.
Yeah, have you heard the one about the tinker, the Taylin, the farmer's daughter, and the butter churn yet?
Yeah. Yeah, so when that's a good build up, right?
Yeah. I mean, what's the joke? Finish it.
So when he notices that he has no response and his face is locked and Fenton's face is locked in fierce concentration, he gives up. He does mention, I think it was there. Yeah. So I lowered myself more deeply into the Heart of Stone and forgot the world apart from the 2 candles and a piece of wick and straw. So when Fitz was wanting an explanation of a clear explanation of like Heart of Stone, that to me is a very, very clear way to picture that, where nothing else exists in the world. It's just these 2 candles, a piece of wick, a straw, and he's focused on nothing else.
Yeah. And you get like right before that with his, after a minute I was covered in a clammy, chill sweat. I shivered. Fenton saw this and gave me a smile with bloodless lips. I redoubled my efforts, but his candle ignored my best attempts to force it into flame. So you get this like gradual buildup of what it's doing to his body, and that he's not able to overcome it. Fenton is thinking he's going to win, and then it builds up. Like 5 minutes had passed while the whole class was quiet as stones. Most duels lasted no more than a minute or two. One person quickly proving himself more clever or possessed of a stronger will. Both my arms were cold now. So it's like whole body is just slowly becoming colder. The whole, the battle is going way longer than expected. You get the wisp of smoke began to curl from his wick, and then he bore down even harder. And then at some point, Fenton must have cut himself and tried to get him through blood, and from doing that he gave himself binder's chills, and that's what ended up putting him under and why he lost.
That whole progression, man, it's really impressive to me because it's ripe with tension the whole time. It's difficult to picture. How do you write 2 people thinking really hard? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, how do you do that? But like, I bore down. I realized that my breath was hissing through my clenched teeth. My lips pulled back in a feral grin. It's great. And Fenton didn't seem to notice, his eyes growing glassy and unfocused. So he's shivering, and then it starts to shiver more violently. Fenton had like a muscle in his neck starts to pulse like a, what did he say? Like almost like a...
Woodenly, Fenton turned to look, but instead of rallying to his own defense, he made a slow, leaden gesture of dismissal and laid his head in the crook of his arm. Yeah,
it's man, it builds so well, man, and then it gets really bad for Fenton.
Yeah, well, you can, and that's the other progression, is seeing how Fenton kind of goes from there's one point. So Fenton kind of goes from an extreme focus, like like almost like he's in the Heart of Stone, and Kvothe can't shake his focus. But then at some point when Kvothe is really concentrating, he mentions that Fenton's focus kind of shifts to the side, or he looks off into the distance.
He passes out. Yeah, he passes out. Like,
well,
that's what that part, like, it's said,
Is it
Fenton
not
didn't
prior
seem to notice his eyes growing glassy and unfocused. I shivered again so violently I almost missed seeing the trimmer in his hand. Then slowly Fenton's head began to nod toward the tabletop. His eyelids drooped. I set my teeth. So, yeah, he went from... It looked like he was going to win, and I think he would have won had he not tried to draw from his blood. He tried to... It's basically the way I picture this in my mind is like a boxer's got a guy on the ropes and he fucking empties the gas tank trying to knock the guy out and he's not able to knock him out. And then he has nothing left to defend himself. And then the guy, recovers, gets his feet under him and then proceeds to knock the guy out after he's fucking punched himself out. And I think that's what Fenton did. Had Fenton been more patient and just kept defending and waiting for Kvothe to wear down, I think he would have ended up winning.
Well, would he have had that amount of sympathetic link that he possibly could have? I mean, I guess it depends on when in the battle Fenton, because they don't really say how Fenton cut his finger, do they?
No.
Yeah,
I mean, he just made himself bleed. It doesn't,
right.
So
it's
what
I'm saying,
said exactly when it happens. But
all I mean is, would he even be able to come even close to Kvothe's Alar if he hadn't had that strong sympathetic link? Not only did he have the wick, but he had blood coming straight from his, to be able to pull the heat out. Would he have been able to do
that's what I'm saying. I don't think he did that right away. I think that's what he ended up... at some point, I think he thought he could go for the kill, and he went for it, and he missed. Maybe. But I think had he just focused on his defense, because Kvothe could not get through his defense. He couldn't do anything. He wasn't having any luck at all, and it wasn't until Fenton passed out that he was able to light his candle on fire. And so Kvothe, through that battle, started off feeling chills, and then the chills kept progressing. He was getting worse, and he went and had major problems. Like at the end of this, he goes and hides in the hallway for a few minutes and is shaking violently. So he was obviously in bad shape. I think had Fenton just been patient and just been more focused on his defense, he would have eventually wore Kvothe out first. But he went for that win, and it cost him.
Yeah, it's interesting how they reveal that, because they kind of reveal that a little bit later. My reputation was intact. He walked out when all the hubbub was going on, when they basically realized, dude's going to die. And that's how dangerous. I mean, there's so much gets accomplished in this chapter, because we also realize the risks of doing these types of things, because he would have died. Fenton would have died if they weren't there. If somebody wasn't there to help him, he's out on his own. He's dead.
This chapter is great for setting up his battle with the bandits in the woods.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Or Devi.
Well,
that
specifically the binder's chills.
Yeah.
Because he almost dies of hypothermia. He assumes when he's fighting the bandits in the woods, he assumes that what he's doing is going to kill him. That he's not going to survive, because he's at one point he's like, I got to end this now, because if I don't get under a fire, I'm going to die anyways.
Right.
And so this sets up how dangerous binder's chills are, and it also sets up that shows that Ambrose is likely the one who broke his lute string, and you get that in the in a couple chapters. So, but binder's chills this was good for a couple other parts in the book, setting this up.
Yeah, and I thought that just having reread it, I remembered going through it the first time and just being really captivated by the story itself. And then this reread, I kind of like what's the big deal? I should say, going into it, it's, and I may be being redundant here, but the trivial nature of being in class and just doing this battle, and Kvothe's got this reputation and this and that, and he needs money, but it really then the story kicks in and really just sucks you in and you're feeling those cold chills as you're moving through the story of Fenton and himself and Kvothe himself starting to wear down and the intensity of the scene. It's just amazing how you could take how Rothfuss takes something that seems like it's a trivial scenario and really makes it just a really in-depth and enthralling part of the book.
Yeah, he takes a lecture in a classroom. He takes a lecture in a classroom scene and a scene where he's trying to introduce Binder's Chills. There's a lot of world building and info dump in this chapter. But again, it's unbelievably entertaining. It's extremely engrossing. It's so, very rare how good he is at this. It's very rare someone's that good.
It's so intense, man. There's so much tension because of everything that's being built up with Kvothe and what he has on the line and how like he's in a vulnerable state. And then to do something like this, again, I think it does definitely speak volumes again to, and he thought he was done. Although, again, I guess Fenton did make a big mistake here as well because, like the guy even says, whoever hits him on the back or, congratulates Kvothe, he's like, oh, how about that? He wore himself out. Like, well, yeah, he went too far. He took it too far because, like Dan said, it didn't look like Kvothe had... If Fenton just kept his defenses up, he probably would have eventually wore Kvothe through. But, I mean, who knows? Didn't work out that way, so...
Yeah, it's tough to know for certain, but it didn't sound like Kvothe was going to win, and then, it turned around when Fenton passed out, and I don't think he would have if he had just stuck to using his body heat. Maybe it would have been a stalemate. Who knows? Maybe both of them would have failed. Here's one of the parts that troubles me more than the rope is when he starts thinking about the magic. He's like, he thinks about making a moment of it, and could he even get enough force to like stab it, and then you wouldn't even know if it died. But like I'm like, what about like a bad link? Like because if you had like a link between chalk and a coin, the piece of chalk becomes so heavy you can't pick it up. What if you made a bad link with the Dracus, the iron of the Dracus, and you linked it to a coin? Wouldn't that make the Dracus, his iron, so heavy that it would just like fucking crush him to the ground where he couldn't fucking rise up?
I like that, Dan. That's profound.
And take steps. Yeah, like that's kind of the things like I think of. Like it's kind of like when we were talking about the pranks you could pull, like make a guy's pants fall down. Why couldn't you make the iron scales so heavy that the Dracus couldn't even move by making a bad link? Like that's one of the things like I want to know more from Rothfuss, like how these bad links exactly work, and what would be the function of that? Because like why can't you do that? Because it seems like that's exactly what you should be able to do. Because why can you make a piece of chalk so heavy that you could barely pick it up if you can't make a Dracus scale so heavy that it can't move? Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to do that. So, like, my thought process was make a bad link with the scales so that it's so heavy that it can't even move, and then just, like, go up and fucking stab it to death. Stab it through its fucking eyes and shit.
Well, isn't there... it can't move. What are the rules? I mean, isn't one of the rules no energy can be, like, created or lost? What is it?
Or destroyed. It can be lost, but it's not lost. It created or destroyed.
Okay, but the weight is created. You have to create that weight. It has to, right? So it's not in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, the energy isn't lost, which is why it would become so heavy.
I don't know, man. I have a feeling Rothfuss would just be like, "You're missing the whole picture here." But I don't really see.
That's what I want to. That's what I want to know, because like when he makes a link between a piece of chalk and a coin, the chalk is fucking super fucking heavy, or the coin is super fucking heavy. So like, why can't you do that to the Dracus? Like, why couldn't you do that?
Do you remember the steps as he explains them? In Hem's class, do you remember like the three? It's I'm asking if you can tell me them now. I know it's.
I mean, off the top of my head, no. Like, I mean, but that's the basics of it. Is like the better the link, the more similar the objects are, the better the link is one of them.
Consanguinity is one of them, right? So there's. I'm trying to tease it out because you're bringing up the point. I'm like, we could deal with it, but I know one's like. Yeah, I don't know. Because when you brought that up about like, just drowning someone in a lake, I can't refute it, but it seems like a massive hole in terms of how sympathy works because no one's doing this. Now, I get like malfeasance is a thing and there seems to be this honor amongst thieves or honor amongst gentlemen, right? With the university, but if someone like Ambrose doesn't give a fuck. If he can get away with it, he's going to do what he's going to do. Clearly, he does not give a shit about doing things like that. There's got to be more people like that just don't give a damn, and they'll do it. And in this situation, I mean, shit, man, Kvothe would do whatever he's got to do, right? And if that sounds like a much more elegant out of this situation than trying to drug this thing, because how does that work out?
Yeah. Well, it's the fact that we see numerous times where a bad link would make something super fucking heavy by combining two things. Yeah. Like to pick it up, it would make it super fucking heavy. So that can be done. You can make bad links, and you can make a piece of chalk weigh significantly more. So I don't see any logical reason why you could not do that to a Dracus I would need to know more. I need to know what I'm missing, why you wouldn't be able to do that. And I don't know what I'm missing.
But I mean, obviously that's a big that's a big hole, man. Like, but again, maybe we're missing something. Because again, when I try to step myself through it, it feels like it's the 3 C's, right? Whatever those 3 C's are. There's consanguinity. For some reason, I remember that one. But then there's the other, which, if I remember right, consanguinity is the similarity between things, right? Isn't that what that is? And then it's, I remember no energy can be created or whatever the fuck. I don't know. I'm trying to think. But even picturing like how a heat eater works, that's sucking energy. Right.
So the 3s are, let's see, the second principle of consanguinity, which says a piece of a thing can represent the whole of a thing. The third is the law of conservation, which says energy cannot be destroyed nor created.
Okay, so is a force
the other one was correspondence.
Creating. Okay, so that's the similarity. But wouldn't you say so? Can't be created. If you're adding weight to something, you're creating an energy, right? Or you're just using gravity.
Yeah, I don't know. But like, I mean, you can make a piece of chalk way more. So yeah. You should be able to make the iron scales of a Dracus way more with a bad link.
Well, didn't the chalk?
There would have to be some aspect of it.
Hold on. So doesn't it just weigh more to the Arcanist? Doesn't it just weigh more to the individual trying to lift it? It's not
anybody
that it actually
trying to
weighs
lift that
more...
piece of chalk. Anybody.
Okay, but it's heavier to the person trying to lift it. It doesn't mean the chalk's actually heavier. It's just heavier to lift.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But the scales, you have to lift your legs.
Okay,
you have to move. Your body would be heavier.
Okay, but it's heavier to you. It's heavier to the person trying to move it.
No, it's heavier. Period. The energy. It's not the energy cannot be lost or created. So like when you make that piece of chalk heavy, it doesn't matter if you're the person doing it. Anybody who goes and tries to pick up that piece of chalk is going to feel that it's heavier. It's literally heavier because it's not just like. Because he even says something along the lines, he's like, it's like you're picking up both coins at the same time because you are, except for it's more than that because it's a bad link. So it's like picking up 6 coins or, something like that. So for the Dracus, it's not like that. Its scales are not only heavier, but it would be significantly heavier to the point where, like, to be able to move would become more cumbersome.
I'm wondering if it is literally, because when you say it's literally heavier, if
It
it's
is.
literal, okay, but I'm saying if it's literally heavier to the Arcanist, if it's literally heavier to the person that's trying
Heavier
to
to
wield
anybody.
this power.
No, anybody.
Okay, so 6 coins could break through the table if the link's bad enough.
Possibly, yeah, possibly.
So
That should be the way it works, because it's not just it. Denna, when Kvothe and Will and Sim are doing sympathy, and Denna goes to pick up one of the coins, she's like, "It's heavy. It's not just for this sympathist.
Yeah. Okay.
It's literally heavier."
All right, that was I needed an example like that, and that does give the example. All right, so yeah, that's a problem. Someone should have ripped him's pants off. Like, clearly, that would have been great.
So, like, that's what I would like to talk to Rothfuss about it, because that's where my mind goes. Is like, I start thinking about when I hear about the bad links, my mind immediately goes to like pranks, or like when I read about this, it goes to like, well, I would have just fucking linked a piece of paper and the Dracus' scales and fucking weighed that thing down so it couldn't fucking
Wait a
move, or
minute,
it
so-
sinks into the ground.
real quick here, Dan, I think that we're thinking of the opposite though, because even though it's okay, so even though let's say you have similar objects first, if you're picking one up, you're picking the other one up, you're still picking that weight of the other object up. There's no loss there. If it's a bad link, you're picking that up through kind of a mud, or consider it like using a pulley. You have to pull it twice as far to get it to come up half as much because it's a bad link. And so, but my point was, if you linked a piece of paper to the Dracus, the paper would be the thing that's 1,000 pounds. The Dracus would be lighter.
Okay, but even if you go that, I've thought about that too. So like the paper would be heavier, but to the Dracus it's just paper, so the paper's not adding that much weight to the paper. Okay, do it in reverse then. Link the Dracus to a mountain.
Yeah. Okay.
Take a rock of the mountain,
Yeah, I
and
wonder.
link
There,
the
that's
rock is the mountain. Make a binding to the rock to the mountain, and then the rock to the scales, and just fucking crush that with the weight of a mountain.
Yes. I think that's.
I wonder
To
if,
me, that you should be able to do that.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
wonder if you brought this up to Rothfuss, if he literally fought you,
Yeah,
or if he was just like, you know what,
motherfucker,
go fuck yourself, and then just walked out of the room. So when
Shut
he's
the
up at the
fuck up. I'm not
Yeah,
rewriting the goddamn book.
It was such a tiny
you
little
think you know
aspect.
everything.
You gotta
You
just
think
keep
you know
digging.
everything.
whole reason it's been taking so long to come out with this next book is he's just paranoid someone's gonna think of this shit. He's like, someone's gonna fucking call me on this. I know it. I gotta fucking figure out a way to get out of this. He's been thinking for years, trying to figure out a way to solve this problem. But to me, I mean, that is like, to me, that's I want an explanation on that. I don't know if it's going to be in the books, but I want an explanation why you couldn't just like fucking link someone to a mountain and squish them like a fucking grape immediately.
Yeah, that's problematic. That's well, and it's such a problem that I was just trying to offer the easiest answer possible, because I mean, you'd have to, but I don't know. I don't. That's very problematic. Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have a good answer on it. I've tried to think of reasons why it wouldn't work, and I can't think of anything, because he has multiple examples where things are, because of bad links, things are heavier. You can't lift them, or they're extremely heavy to lift. So,
Hey, maybe
yeah,
Kvothe
it's a problem.
just didn't
Like,
think of it.
and like he's also got examples where like bad links rip fucking dude's arms off. He like tries to lift
it's
fucking
true.
wagon and rips his arms off. So we know like the weight of these things can do severe damage. So
So why not leverage?
why
that?
can't you link something to a mountain and fucking just smash it like a grape.
Maybe he's saying that Kvothe's not that advanced. That Dan,
Yeah,
you're farther along.
Yeah.
Maybe
nobody,
it's like
nobody in all the years of Sympathy has thought of this.
Maybe it's like George Costanza.
If I went to the university, I asked them that, I'd blow all their nips off.
Yeah, they'd all.
Well, maybe. Is that what it sounds like? Maybe it's like a George Costanza thing where it only works for the good things, not for the bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a tough one to figure out.
But yeah, we don't really we won't come up with a solution for it. That's one we need to talk to Rothfuss to get an explanation. At least I'm not able to puzzle it out on what I've read. Yeah, before we dive into that, one thing I wanted to bring up, because we talked about Rothfuss with the holes and the Sympathy on the last episode, and so I was thinking about it more, and so I was one of the things I looked up is slippage, which I think would be where Rothfuss could go to kind of close up that hole. And he could make slippage be some aspect of the answer for why you couldn't, make a bad link between something and just smash the Dracus under, the weight of a mountain or something along those lines. Because he talks about when he's having a discussion with Manette about slippage, Manette says thermal slippage is fairly common though. Now kinetic slippage, he raised his eyebrows appreciatively. 20 years back, some damn fool Elxa got drunk and tried to lift a manure cart onto the roof of the master's hall on a bet. Tore his own arm off at the shoulder. I'm not sure that this would answer it, but I think that's where Rothfuss would go. It doesn't explain why you couldn't do this. It explains if Kvothe made a bad link between a rock and the Dracus, and he was holding that rock where you could see the rock would rip through his hand or pull his arm off or something along those lines. But it doesn't explain exactly how the slippage would work, where it would prevent you from doing it completely, where if you did it, it would be dangerous. If you weren't holding the rock or trying to lift something up, if you just linked those things and you didn't try to lift them, it's still not clear to me, how slippage would be a deterrent. But I thought about it a little bit.
I thought about it a little bit more too, Dan. It's as far as slippage goes, I think of resistance and electricity. So with your toaster, when those heating elements get hot and glow red, you're actually directly transferring your energy and turning it into heat, right? So the slippage there is the resistance that's in each one of those little heat elements. So what you're saying is, I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to agree with what you said last week and say that if the slippage is comparable to resistance, where the energy transfer is direct, there can't be the energy can't be created. So even though you have something that's heavy, you can't make it more heavy by having slippage. It would make it less heavy because the gravitational force is the original force. And so when you try to transfer that to another object, your slippage would only make it lighter.
But that energy has to go somewhere. So the whole point of it, with the slippage on, thermal slippage is if you're trying to heat something, that energy is lost. The reason the slippage is dangerous is what slips out, some of it goes into the sympathist, so he could set his own blood on fire. He could burn himself to death, and so I could see something where he would. I just would need it explained. I would need to know how the slippage would work with kinetic slippage, where if you had a really bad link where that lost energy or whatever goes back into you and would crush your own body or something. Because
I was gonna say. Yeah, it seems like the answer would be, well, he'd crush himself as he crushes the Dracus.
Mhm.
right? And so I guess I could see that, but he's not using himself as the Force, right? So
Yeah.
it seems like you could say that, but it doesn't. I don't see a direct connection why it has to travel through him because he's the one creating the link.
Yeah, correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it doesn't say that guy through kinetic slippage, like it was just his arm got tore off at the shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, so why just his arm? You would assume because he tried to lift something with his arm, and
Yeah.
that
But he's
slippage,
holding the thing that he
you
was
know,
using for the link.
Yeah. So the added weight just ripped his arm off. It was made it too heavy.
Yeah.
But it the fact that it didn't like crush his body or something along those lines makes me think that he would have to he still has to come up with some explanation, because it's like when he creates a bad link between the coin and the chalk, there's no mention of like he felt pressure on his body or something along those lines.
Yeah.
There's no mentions of that. It's just the only mention of kinetic slippage is that guy's arm ripping off, which would tell you that he was trying to lift something with that arm, not that it like all the slippage went into his arm and just rips his arm fell off. Like that doesn't seem to be a likely explanation. So I still don't know how you could resolve the issue, but slippage would have to be the area that he would go. It's just he would have to tighten up slippage and make sense why it would work as a deterrent for doing those kind of things.
Does the object have to be physically in his hand?
No, because like he can light a candle and stuff. He doesn't have to be holding.
Well, he's drawing on. Yeah, I guess that's true because yeah.
But
Well,
even still, you could just put your finger on top of a rock that's on the ground, even if you have to touch it. You wouldn't have
and
to.
The rock
like
would be pulling downward, not pulling him downward.
Yeah, you
so
wouldn't have to like hold
finger.
it. You could just like touch it. So
it's beneath
still.
his hand. So if it pulled down, it would just pull to the center of the earth. It wouldn't pull him down.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I still don't. And then the other thing I thought of that I text you guys on is why can't Kvothe link the air outside with the air in the Dracus's lungs like he did to himself and suffocate the thing?
I thought about it, but doesn't he blow on his fingers?
No, he just says a word. He says the binding.
And the word to bind.
Yeah, he says the binding, and then he blows out air. And when he blows out air, a gust of wind also blows because he.
So he blows out air, and that's what binds his own air to the air outside.
The binding was the word, the alar and the word are what created the link and the sympathetic link. And so when he blew out the air, that was just utilizing the link that he created to make the air. That didn't like solidify the link or anything. The reason when he blew out air, the reason there was a gust of wind behind him is because he had already linked the air in his lungs to the air outside. So when he blew, the air outside also blew. And so
okay, I see.
Yeah, so he had already created the link. So you would think like he would be able to do that to the Dracus because it's just air. It's not like the air is not a part of the Dracus. It's not like blood where your body is creating the blood inside yourself, so it's a part of you, or your skin or your hair. Those things are a part of you, so you could see where you would need those things to make a link. But why wouldn't you be able to link air? Because you can take a fire from a brazier and make a link with a candle's fire and a brazier's fire, because those are just two elements. They're not a part of you. You don't need either one to be able to link them. So it's in the same way like how he puts out the fire, like he links the fire on the shingle to the others, and then when he stabs the shingle underneath the water, it's not like he had to he had to be holding on to the fire the whole time. They were still linked even when he's not holding them. So why can't
once he's made the link, it's there?
Yeah. So why can't he?
And he had he had the scale. I mean, if it did require that, he had the scale. He could have done it with the scale.
I wonder. Well, I was going to say perhaps it hadn't occurred to him, and this is something he thinks of later.
It's the only explanation.
But the problem with that is all of these guys that have gone through the Arcanum. Well, I don't mean to say that he would be the first that would think of this, because you would think someone else has thought to do something similar to this. But we only have what Rothfuss is giving us in terms of the history. We haven't heard anybody else do this other than Kvothe attempting it and nearly killing himself. But if he can do it to himself, it seems logical that he would be able to do it to somebody else.
You would think it would be like if it's a possibility, if you can do this, if Rothfuss doesn't have an explanation why you couldn't do this, that when you would go to hunt animals and that kind of thing, that this would be a common technique that would be taught to easily kill an animal without having to fire an arrow or anything at it. You just suffocate it. And so you would think this would become common knowledge, after a period of time, as a good way to kill an animal at least. And so it's hard to understand why, Kvothe wouldn't. This would be something that Kvothe would think about. Like, you would think this would just be if this is possible, you would think it'd be common knowledge within all Arcanists that they have the ability to do this. And Kvothe did it to himself, so he certainly knows that it's possible to do it at least to himself.
Well, I was going to say, also, talk about pranks. Pretty good prank to do this, like, sort of in reverse, where you just fill up Hem's asshole with air.
Yeah.
While he's teaching a class. Give him bubble guts.
All
real
the
quick.
gas. All the gas in his fucking, in his intestines.
It'd be pretty funny to watch somebody, because
Yeah.
Start grabbing their gut, bending over, you're just
Severe
sitting there
cramps.
giggling.
Dan, no sound effects? Like, it go in and out, like... And Quote's just standing there in the back of the class with his hand over his mouth, like... as Hem's up there farting himself.
But I definitely want to know more about slippage, and I want to know why you couldn't do something like link air in someone else's lungs and to the air outside. Why would it have to be air in your lungs? There needs to be another layer of information on Sympathy. I think he needs another layer on Sympathy
we need
to make
more,
these things clear.
We need more about the restrictive nature of the linkages, of the ability of the individual who's doing the sympathetic bindings, what those restrictions are, why you can't pants people.
Yeah.
Or all of it. I mean, all of kind of what you're bringing up. I mean, especially the Dracus. I mean, that brings up a huge element in terms of he's got a scale. Can he not move him around because he's so big? Is that what we're going with? Because we've heard of people being able to do things that seem to be beyond what would be feasible. I mean, I don't know what a Loden does with at the rookery. I mean, it's otherworldly. Now I know he's not a Loden, but still, I mean, he's filled his own lungs with air. It didn't occur to him.
Now that we're talking about it, I'm thinking back to when that occurrence when him and Abenthy are on the wagon and he binds his his lungs to the air outside. Prior to that, he's talking about how he would bring down a bird, and it's real easy if he's got a feather. Again, he's got a scale. Why can he not? I don't know, cut the scale in half or break it?
Yeah.
Well, he does talk about cutting the scale, and that would take pressure. Just like when he tries to cut he binds 5 arrows, bow strings together. He combines like 5. He does a sympathetic link with 5 guys that are shooting arrows at him when he's fighting the bandits in the woods. And so he links 5 of their bowstrings to the bowstring that he has. So but when he was cutting through it, it was like sawing through like a log. So it wasn't just like cutting a string anymore because the...
Oh, I see. So
because
that one...
Yeah, so like
the increased tension,
to be able to stab through the scale, to link the scale to the Dracus with a moment and a scale, and then to like poke, it would be very difficult to even stab through it. And so he's not even sure that he would be able to do any
damage.
And then he also talks about, like, I wouldn't know if it killed it. I wouldn't know what happened to it because it's not in my sight. So he does think about that.
Well, and then he sees what the tree does to him, and he's like, dude, there's nothing I could do to bring force on this thing.
Yeah. So as far as that kind of force doesn't make sense.
Except for the negative sympathy you're talking about in terms of wielding the weight of a bad link. Yeah, that's a real, but I mean, that's kind of the problem that's come up a number of times. Because you talked about that, I think originally it popped up, if there's a guy in a lake swimming, you don't like him, why can't you just get him to the bottom of the lake, by
so what you got,
his shorts or whatever he's wearing.
What you're saying makes sense, but how can, if he does explain it away and says, okay, yes, let's say that he says, yes, there's a way you can do it, but, whatever. Where does that energy come from? The energy of slippage that I'm assuming that they talk about when the guy ripped his arm off. If energy can't be created or destroyed, where did that energy come from? The energy of the slippage. You see what I'm saying? Because, the way I would think about it is if you're trying to lift a car with a penny by linking the two and you use a bad link, okay, you lift the car by lifting the penny, but because it's a bad link, you rip your arm off, right?
Yeah.
But at that point, the slippage is it's that your link is ineffectual.
It seems like a bad
force
calculation.
Is from the right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the force is you wouldn't rip his arm off because he wouldn't be able to lift it in the first place.
Yeah, unless like you were already holding the penny, and then you made the link, and then they pulls your arm off. Is just like a quick sudden pressure on your arm.
But why wouldn't that be a good link? Because really all he's done is made the penny heavier instead of the car lighter. That seems like a good link and not a
it's a bad link in the sense that they're not, if you're trying to find something that has similarities to each other, the more dissimilar they are, the worse the link. So in that sense, it's a bad link. But if the purpose was to make the penny extremely heavy, you could say that's a good outcome, but it's a bad link because they're so dissimilar. And the more dissimilar something is, the heavier, as far as like linking two objects to each other, the more dissimilar they are, the heavier the objects are going to become when you link them.
Yeah, that opens up a whole other can of worms, but that's right. We'll move on if you want. If you want to,
it's
hash it out. I don't think we'll get to it.
It's interesting to tease out, but we can't come to a conclusion. We need more information. That's the main thing.
But I just mainly wanted to bring up, I think slippage would be where he would go with it, and it's just needs to be more information on slippage to make it make sense why you would limit you in that way. Yeah, so that's why you can't breathe in. Now here's my big problem with this chapter is, with everything we know about Sympathy and about the Alar, it seems like the sensible thing for Kvothe to do is to just release his Alar, just to release the binding. Like when he's picking up coins and he wants to not lift up 2 coins, he just released the binding and that would drop the coin. And in this situation, like, why wouldn't you just release the binding? And then you should be able to breathe like normal.
So maybe,
like, why wouldn't you do that?
So if I can get a better understanding while we're at it, he uses a term or a phrase, right? Is it sigildry?
Binding. It's
It's a binding word, right? And
Yeah, it's a word.
And basically
Yes.
what he does is, in his mind, he holds on to that word. That's his alar, holding that binding, and that's what makes it work. The stronger he can hold that word inside his mind, the stronger the binding between the two objects is. Am I understanding?
Well, like the alar would be like holding a belief, and the binding would be like the magical word
That
you need to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so, like with any other binding, when he wants to let it go, he just lets it go. But in this situation, like when he's like can't breathe, you would just think like, okay, just let it go. Let go of the binding that is binding your air in your lungs to the air outside.
Yeah.
Just let it go. Let your alar go. Let it go. And then just breathe like normal.
You can undo the binding.
Yes.
And you would think it would be, so to follow that line of logic, you would think it would be his own natural inclination of his body's survival instinct to then undo the binding. But not to be held captive by it. It's threatening his life.
And even if it's a situation where he's in a panic mode and he's just not thinking and he's holding on, like, you know, he stuck his hand in a hole and all he has to do to get his hand out of the hole is let go, but he's in a panic, so he's just holding on to this thing and he keeps trying to pull his hand out and he won't let go. Like
a monkey with a banana in a jar.
That I can understand. That he just won't. Yeah, he won't let go, and he keeps trying to pull his hand out, but he can't because he's not thinking and he won't let go. But then the other aspect of that is you can break someone else's alar. So why wouldn't Abenthy just fucking break his alar and end the binding?
Is there any other instances in the books where somebody's alar gets deadlocked in a panic?
No. But there is battles between alars where someone has to overpower the other person. Like there is Fenton versus Kvothe when they're trying to light each other's candles. Or
so Ben
Kvothe versus Devi.
So Ben could have definitely broke that alar. And probably
One
did.
would think he should have been very easily capable. Or, well, he should have been capable.
Because, you know, Kvothe's a 12-year-old kid that's just learning sympathy for the first time.
However, he is Arladin's son. He is, you know, if we want to believe in the power of that lineage and perhaps ascribe to it, and I'm just being devil's advocate here and being Fitz, because Fitz is the devil, apparently, because he's always been the devil's advocate. But if we're just going to give that to him...
the devil's advocate was somebody who was against the devil.
It's Al Pacino. If we literally just give the credit to the lineage and say he's ever powerful and all these things that he tries to do, he can do exceptionally well because of his lineage, then perhaps he can hold an alar that is astounding. However, Devi breaks it, right?
Yes. When he's way more powerful.
Yeah. But is he weakened with Devi?
Here's the thing.
Hold on. Isn't he weakened with Devi in some way? Like he hasn't slept in a while? There's something.
Well, yeah,
like that.
he's being attacked by Ambrose
at
for
the same
a long period of time, where he's constantly.
He doesn't have the gram yet.
He has to every waking moment he has to have his alar up.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's not a fair fight when he fights with Devi. But here's the thing. Like, you could make excuses. You could make a way for it to make sense. You could say that, like, when he did this thing, the reason he didn't release his alar because he was in a panic state, and so he was holding on to his alar. And then through his panic state, his alar was so fucking strong that Abenthy wasn't able to overcome it. He wasn't able to overcome what he was doing. So he had to call the name of the wind to be able to breathe breath back into his lungs or whatever he did when he called the name of the wind. But it does not seem like it should have been as big of a problem as it was based on what we know about Sympathy. And we can come up with explanations. We can, finesse it and come up with explanations after the fact to try to make it make sense. But the fact that they didn't explain it is a problem.
So
the fact that Abenthy wasn't like, holy shit, like, what the fuck's up with your Alar? Like, I tried to break your binding and I couldn't break it. Or like Abenthy is not like, hey, you fucking moron, why didn't you just stop?
Yeah, because
like, what the fuck were you thinking? Just stop.
And that opportunity is presented later in the chapter because he says,
yes,
here's the problem. They have the discussion. That's where it would have been. Right?
Yeah,
whatever.
There was no explanation of, like, you should have stopped. You shouldn't have done, like, once you realized the problem, you should have broke your Alar. You should have broke that binding on your own. Or, like, here's a huge problem. Is you didn't see that you could have broke your that binding just on your own, and when I tried to overpower it, I wasn't able to do it. I had to like physically call the name of the wind to break, to breathe breath back into your lungs. The fact that there's no explanation seems like a fucking big ass fucking hole.
I'm gonna take
the book.
I'm gonna go ahead.
So this could be kind of this is not extraordinarily strong, but it could be a sense of, again, I'm just trying here, but you tell someone their IQ is above average. You know what I'm saying? And then now they know that, so then they don't take things as seriously or don't think they have to study as hard. You know what I mean? Like, I could see that. I could see like, oh, this guy is so freaking powerful. I can't tell him he's so powerful because he could wield it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I can attach that to what's happening here only because he nearly kills himself. So I don't want him to be as powerful as some evil person. So instead, let me tell him what he did was wrong and then dip out and not teach him anymore because I taught him too much already.
So
he doesn't even if you see a kid waving a sword fucking around like a maniac, you're going to be like, no, you don't do that because of XYZ. He doesn't even give him what you did. He just says like, whoa, that was stupid. And that was it. Like, he doesn't fucking give any explanation for
which
why.
Which doesn't fit his character.
Other than, he only says, like, your thought process was stupid. Not like, what you did was insanely fucking powerful. And, like, he should have still said, like, why didn't you fucking think to just let go, you moron?
Well, okay, there's that, but then he also gives him a half-measured metaphor to try to teach him a lesson anyway, which doesn't get completed. Yeah. So, which, again, if I'm trying to make excuses, it would be maybe telling him thoroughly what the danger was. I don't know. This is hard. It's
all right.
hard to
I'm going to take
it because it doesn't.
It's a hole.
I'm going to take it like a hole.
It's the only hole in the book that I've found, and it is a hole that I can't plug up.
Dan,
and Rothfuss needs to answer for it.
I'm going to just go ahead and take liberty and answer for Rothfuss here. Okay. It does have to do with Kvothe's extremely powerful Alar. And in Panic, the grasp that he had on it. I'm going to go ahead and make that assumption. Secondarily, I'm going to make the assumption that to call the name of something when you know it is much easier than to take on the Alar and battle someone, especially in the heat of their panic. Abenthy, immediately when Kvothe, binds the air to his lungs, he, grasps his chest, he opens it up. As soon as he looks like he needs help, Abenthy calls the name of the wind. Kvothe gets his lungs back. Okay?
It seems like calling the name of the wind is not an easy thing.
I disagree.
No, it's way harder.
I disagree.
Dude, what are you talking about? The books make it very clear it's extraordinarily difficult.
Extraordinarily difficult to learn the name of the wind. Not extraordinarily difficult to call it or anything. Look at Bass calling the name of iron. Just right now. Like he's not sweating. He didn't have to even flinch. He just calls it. They're not having trouble calling the name. They have trouble learning how to or learning what it is. So it's not hard to break somebody's alar when you can go to the other side and convince the wind that don't listen to him.
Okay,
Anyway,
I understand where you're going with it. Okay, so he knows the name of the wind, so it's super easy for him. So it's easier for him to call the name of the wind to break than to break Kvothe's alar, so he didn't even try to break it because it's easier for him to call the name of the wind.
Okay, so you're on board?
Okay. But why didn't he tell Kvothe, why didn't you let go of your alar? Because that's way simpler. Like Kvothe, that seems like if you're teaching someone all these magical powers and this kid almost killed himself, like just the same way as you would say, like if you want to let go of that coin, just let go of your alar. Just let go of the belief. And like, why didn't you just let go of the belief that the air in your lungs was bound to the air outside? Just let it go, man.
I'll tell you why.
And that would have fucking saved you.
What if
he's actually trying to teach him not to get in that situation? He never wants to teach him, being the teacher of alar, he never wants to teach Kvothe to let go of his alar. Because that's everything.
That's stupid, though. You just saw this kid almost killed himself by doing it.
So he's teaching him.
He's
teaching him not to be stupid. He's not going to teach him
not to be stupid.
You don't want to teach him to let go of his alar.
He didn't teach him anything.
Well,
don't ever let go of your alar.
Yeah, he needs to teach him to have control of it.
Don't get in stupid situations.
Obviously, we saw the danger here. The way I would be able to sell what Fitz is saying is this would lead up to what ends up bringing him down. This would be the big mistake that happens in book 3 that leads us to where we are in book 1. It's that he didn't learn a lesson in this moment.
You know what?
That would be the only way I could sell
this. That's probably the most profound thing that.
But he learns. Hold on. He learns the lesson about how dangerous the alar is at the university. Like he learns.
Oh, with Fenton.
Like when someone is like Master Elxa Dal or whoever teaches him about like the guy that tried to lift up a fucking barrel or whatever, like a crate or something with his alar and then ripped his arms off or something like that. And then Kvothe was like, oh
I don't
shit.
remember that.
And they were like, oh, you heard about that story? And Kvothe's kind of telling Manette about it, and Manette was like, yeah, that was fucked up when that happened. He's like, oh, this shit, that really happened? He's like, yeah.
I mean,
fucking dude ripped his arms off.
Well, also binder's chills. That teaches you the problem with the alar right there. Yeah. I mean, if you're reckless with this shit, you can kill yourself.
Yeah, he learns about how dangerous it is. Like, I don't see any justifiable reason to not tell him, you should have just let go. It doesn't make any sense. From anything you just said, Fitz, or anything I've ever heard, does not make any sense why Abenthy didn't just say you should have let go.
I agree with you, Dan. I'm just trying to sew up holes to make you feel better.
I'm also just teasing out what we're talking about because that's what the hell would be the reason to talk about it. The whole reason is this could be a hole. Let's tease it out.
Hey, but no, Tim, more importantly is what you said,
I think it's very problematic. Well, no, I think it's very problematic, though, because there are other instances where he does learn the problem with it. And he does. And
Dan.
So he should have. Well, at that young of an age, again, I mean, you would think if it takes so much effort to strengthen your alar to make sure you can hold it, and then your body itself is fighting for its own life, and your body's at risk, one would think your natural inclination would be to drop the alar, stop doing what's killing you or what's about to kill you, if that's what's happening. And
but if your mind is seized up in that, think of it as a seizure.
I get the analogy you guys are using is like you clench your hand so you're not able to then think out, you're not able to solve the problem because Yeah, because the problem itself.
Yeah, but
is what's creating
that
the
part
real-
makes sense. That part makes sense. But Abenthy not telling him that was what the mistake was is a huge fucking problem.
So let's hash that out a little further, because in light of what Tim said about it possibly being, this being the big kind of the name of the wind, the big thing that nearly kills, the turning point, okay, the climax, the turning point. So if it has anything to do with what we don't already know in the future, that Kvothe needs to let go of his Alar?
Well, maybe this cast. Maybe this cast.
He's let go, but he's let go of his Alar so many times. Like, what? I mean, how is that?
But again,
he understands how to let go of his Alar. That's not a lesson he needs to learn. He understands.
So
that.
now,
let's say Abenthy.
Hold on. Here's a perfect example. When he's battling Devi, and she is like, "Let fucking go, or I'm going to fucking set all your clothes on fire, and I'm going to murder you." He fucking let goes immediately. He knows how to let go in a pressure situation.
Okay. I think that Devi talking is different than not being able to breathe as far as level of intensity. But there's no explanation for why Abenthy wouldn't have.
So
explain
my only explanation for that is Abenthy is the villain, or
Abenthy
he's
knows,
the one that's leading him down this path to either he's a Mir or a Chandrian, and not telling Kvothe the mistake he's making leads him down this path. Again, man, I'm just doing this just to.
I like it.
Try to. Well, I'm just trying to close the hole.
Even if Abenthy, let's posit that Abenthy's the villain, but he saved him. So he obviously needs him for some future. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. So he needs him for some future purpose. So he still should have said, like, "Hey, this is you made a stupid mistake because of this reason. Don't make this again, because I need you for this future purpose. I don't want you to make the same mistake again." He did not explain to him how he could have saved himself.
My point is, what if he wants him to make this mistake again?
Don't think of him as a villain, but a catalyst.
Yeah, but then why save him?
Because he needs him to do the next step.
Because he's supposed to do that thing.
Yeah, I know, but you're gambling that he's not going to do it, and like he's only going to do it at the perfect time.
I get it.
Like, don't do it here.
Well,
that's
such guided him right.
I understand. It's very tenuous. No, again, it's very tenuous, but I'm trying to close the hole, and I'm trying to make the excuse for it, and that would seem to be the best excuse given why he didn't say anything to him, is if he is that, like, I like the way Fitz put it, if he's the catalyst, to not tell him would be he wants him in the future. And yeah, dude, it's a long shot, because you're going to go through all your experiences with Elxa Dal, Kilvin, Elodin, all these guys, and you're not going to learn how to break your alarm.
He did, yeah. He did learn from other people. So like, he already learned. Yeah. Like, so even if Abenthy, that was his goal, that goal got thwarted because he learned from Elxa Dal, and then
that
would entail make it sloppy writing if that was the case. So, but shit, man, if it's a whole,
we can't say that until we read book 3.
What's going to happen is Rothfuss will show up at a Comic-Con, and I will be at that same Comic-Con, and I will get up on the mic, and when everybody else asks their questions, like, so is book 3, is fucking Puppet gonna be in book 3? I'm gonna be like, hey, what the fuck was up with this hole in book 1 on chapter fucking 14? There's a fucking huge gaping hole in here. Explain this shit, man. Yeah.
And Rothfuss will be like,
why didn't he just stop?
And Rothfuss will be like, Dan, you need to quit looking at Abenthy.
What he'll do? He'll lean on the podium with both arms, and he'll just go, fuck, and then he'll walk off. He'll leave. And then never finish. He'll never release book 3. He'll be like, "This motherfucker cracked it. He saw my hole. I hope nobody would see it." He just gives up.
No, Tim. He'll say, "Dan, I've heard your podcast. Fitz was right. You need to start looking at Abenthy as a catalyst, not as a villain or a hero,
dude.
More of an angel reincarnated."
You're your angel shit.
Everybody at the Comic-Con will have heard our podcast by then, and so if he goes, Fitz is right, you're just going to hear a chorus of boos.
Everyone will laugh. No. It's not even booing. No. It wouldn't even be booing. Everyone will laugh. I'll just be like, no way. Yeah. Get out of here.
They're all dead.
Seriously.
They're all dead.
And he's like, no, I'm serious. Boo!
That's good stuff.